The sun had just started to set when the airplane touched down. Armin, a wealthy tycoon who had spent most of his life abroad, looked out of the window and felt a wave of emotions rush over him. For years, he had been chasing success, building companies, and making deals in foreign lands. He had achieved everything he once dreamed of: mansions, luxury cars, and respect from powerful people. But deep down, he carried a silent emptiness, one that even his billions could not fill. He had missed the laughter of his son, the warmth of a home, and the simple joys of family. Without informing anyone, Armin decided to return home unannounced. He wanted to see how life had been without him, how his son was growing up, and what the atmosphere of his mansion felt like after so many years of distance. As his driver took him through the familiar roads leading to his estate, memories of his younger days flashed before his eyes. He remembered leaving his crying son in the hands of a maid, Maria, with promises that he would come back soon. But soon had stretched into years. His work had kept him away, and each passing day had only widened the gap between father and child. The mansion stood tall and elegant, lit up by golden lights as evening fell. Armin stepped out of the car, carrying only a small suitcase. The guards at the gate bowed in surprise, unable to believe that their master had returned without warning. He asked them not to announce his arrival to anyone. He wanted to experience the reality of his home exactly as it was, without pretenses or preparation. As he walked through the marble hallway, his polished shoes echoing on the floor, Armin noticed the silence of the house. It felt too quiet, too empty, almost like a museum rather than a home. He ran his fingers along the walls, staring at the portraits of his ancestors. And then his eyes stopped at a framed photo of his son. The boy looked much older than the last time Armin had seen him in person. His heart tightened with regret. How many birthdays had he missed? How many milestones had he ignored in his pursuit of wealth? Suddenly, a faint sound reached his ears. It was laughter, soft and joyful, coming from one of the rooms upstairs. It startled him because the mansion rarely echoed with such warmth. Guided by curiosity, he climbed the staircase slowly, careful not to make a sound. The closer he got, the clearer the voices became. It wasn't just laughter. There was speaking, reading, and even a playful, scolding tone. One voice was his son's, innocent and filled with happiness. The other was Maria's, the maid who had practically raised the boy in his absence. Armin stopped in front of the slightly open door of his son's room. His hand trembled as he pushed it a little wider to see what was happening inside. The scene before him froze him in place. Maria sat on the carpeted floor with a book in her hand. His son was curled up beside her, his head resting gently against her shoulder. She was teaching him to read, pointing at the words patiently while the boy stumbled over the letters. When he made mistakes, she didn't scold him harshly. Instead, she laughed, hugged him tightly, and encouraged him to try again. His son looked safe, loved, and cared for in a way Armin had not imagined. Armin's chest tightened as he watched silently from the doorway. His son's eyes sparkled with a joy that he had never seen when he himself was around. In that moment, he realized the depth of his absence. Maria had not only been a maid in the house, she had become a mother figure, filling the emptiness he had created by being away. He wanted to step inside, to announce himself, to hug his child. But his pride held him back. He stood, frozen, torn between happiness and guilt. The sound of his son's laughter felt like music, yet it pierced his heart with shame. For the first time in years, the tycoon who could control entire industries found himself powerless in front of a simple, human truth. Love could not be bought, and family could not be replaced. The moment stretched longer than he expected. Every smile, every gentle gesture from Maria, every innocent word from his son struck him deeply. He realized that this was what he had missed, what his billions could never give him. And as he remained hidden in the shadows, Armand knew that this unplanned return would change everything in his life. Armand remained frozen by the doorway. Unable to step inside, his heart caught between pride and regret. For years, he had imagined what it would feel like to reunite with his son. He thought the boy might run into his arms, cling to him, and say how much he had been missed. But what he was seeing now was very different. His son already had someone to lean on, someone who gave him the comfort, love, and warmth that a father should have given. And that someone was not him. Maria the maid didn't notice him standing there. She was too busy with the little boy who looked so free and so alive in her care. She was teaching him words, slowly, patiently. Every time he got one right, she clapped softly and hugged him. Every time he stumbled, she laughed kindly, never making him feel small. She didn't treat him as an employer's child. She treated him as her own. Armand's chest tightened. The boy smiled up at her with the kind of trust that pierced his soul. That was his son, the boy he had left behind to chase contracts and boardroom victories. Yet, the bond between them was almost invisible now. His son had learned to live without him. And Maria had stepped into the empty space he had created. Then something happened that shook him even more deeply. The boy looked up at Maria and whispered, "I wish you were my mother." Those 6 words shattered Armand's pride into pieces. He felt his throat dry up, and his eyes stung in a way he hadn't felt in years. He had always thought money would prove his worth, but in that moment, his entire fortune felt worthless. His son didn't crave toys, didn't crave riches, didn't crave luxury. All he wanted was love. And he had gone searching for it in the arms of the maid. Maria froze when she heard the words, and tears welled up in her eyes. She gently stroked the boy's hair and said softly, "I am not your mother, but I love you like one. And your father. He loves you too. He works very hard for you." Armand felt a sharp sting in his chest. Maria, even after carrying the heavy responsibility he had abandoned, was still defending him. She didn't try to make herself look like the hero or the replacement. Instead, she reminded the child that he still had a father. In that instant, Armand realized that Maria wasn't just a maid. She was a woman of deep character. Someone who had sacrificed her own life to protect and nurture his sons. He wanted to walk in, to say something, but he couldn't. His legs wouldn't move. His pride whispered, "You are the father. You are the provider. You are the tycoon who owns everything." But his heart whispered something else. "You are a stranger to your own son. You have been replaced, not by wealth, not by power, but by love." The boy, innocent and pure, hugged Maria tightly, as though afraid she might disappear. "Don't leave me," he said. "You're the only one who cares." Armand turned his face away, his hands trembling. He couldn't bear to hear more. Each word from his son was like a dagger of truth, reminding him of the years he had chosen business over family. He realized that Maria had given his son something far greater than he had ever offered. Her time, her patience, and her heart. Standing in that doorway, Armand saw the difference between presence and absence. A father's role wasn't just to provide money. It was to be there, to hold, to guide, to laugh, and to love. And he had failed at all of it. The longer he watched, the more he understood that this wasn't just a shocking scene, was a mirror. It showed him exactly what he had become. He was an outsider in his own home, a guest in his son's life. And for the first time in decades, the tycoon who had faced ruthless competitors and negotiated billion-dollar deals felt completely powerless. Yet, was also a strange light in his heart. Maria had not let his son grow up cold or bitter. She had filled the emptiness with love. She had preserved the boy's innocence. If not for her, his son might have grown up resenting him completely. Armand slowly stepped back, careful not to make a sound. He didn't want them to see him, yet not when his emotions were this raw. He needed time to think, time to face the truth. His unplanned return had shown him a reality that no amount of preparation could have softened. The tycoon who thought he owned everything had just discovered the one thing he never truly possessed: his son's heart. Asterisk, that night, Armand could not sleep. He sat alone in his grand study, surrounded by shelves of books and files that once symbolized his power. The ticking of the antique clock echoed in the silence. But his mind kept replaying the same images: his son's smile in Maria's arms. The boys whispered, "Wish for a mother," and Maria's gentle voice defending him, even when he had done nothing to deserve it. He poured himself a glass of water, but his hands trembled so much that he spilled it on the desk. For the first time in his life, he felt small. Not because he had failed in business, no. He had conquered the world there. He felt small because he had failed in the one place that truly mattered: his home. The next morning, when sunlight streamed through the curtains, Armand decided to face what he had been avoiding. He walked quietly to his son's room. This time, he didn't stand in the doorway like a stranger. He pushed the door open fully. His son looked up, startled. For a moment, there was silence. The boy blinked, almost not recognizing him. "Papa," the child whispered. Armand's heart twisted. That single word carried confusion, distance, and hesitation. It was not the joyful cry of a child running into his father's arms. It was the cautious voice of someone who wasn't sure how to feel. Double quotes, "Yes, it's me," Armand said softly, kneeling down. "I've come back." The boy didn't move. He stayed close to Maria, his little hand clutching her dress tightly. That sight broke Armand's pride completely. He had imagined his son rushing toward him, but reality was different. The boy felt safer beside the maid than his own father. Maria looked at Armand, her eyes calm yet firm. She gave him a small nod, as if encouraging him to step closer, to bridge the distance he himself had created. Armand swallowed hard and stretched out his arms. "Come here, my son." The boy hesitated, then slowly walked forward. His small steps echoed louder than any applause Armand had ever received in his life. When the child finally reached him, Armand wrapped him in his arms. The boy was stiff at first, unaccustomed to his father's embrace, but little by little, he relaxed. Tears filled Armand's eyes as he whispered, "I'm sorry. I should have been here. I should never have left you for so long." The boy didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. Armand could feel how fragile this moment was, like holding a delicate glass that could break with one wrong move. Later that day, Armand sat with Maria in the kitchen. For years, he had barely spoken to her except to give instructions. But now, he looked at her with new respect. "You have done more than I ever asked," he said quietly. "You have raised my son not just with care, but with love. I cannot repay you for what you've given him." Maria smiled faintly. "I only did what was right, sir. He needed love, and I could not let him grow up without it. But he still needs you." A mother's love can comfort, but only a father's presence can guide. Her words struck him deeply. Armand realized that money could hire help, but it could never replace presence. A father was not just a provider, he was a protector, a teacher, a friend. And he had abandoned all of those roles. From that day onward, Armand began to change. He no longer disappeared behind office doors all day. Instead, he spent his mornings walking with his son in the garden, listening to his innocent questions. In the evenings, he helped with schoolwork, even if he stumbled more than Maria did. Slowly, laughter returned to the mansion, not just from Maria's care, but from the bond of father and child rebuilding itself. But the biggest change was within Armand himself. He no longer introduced himself to the world as just a tycoon. He started to see himself as something far greater: a father learning to love again. He still respected Maria deeply, often thanking her for filling the role he had abandoned. Sometimes he even wondered if God had sent her to save his son from growing up cold and unloved. Months later, one evening, as the three of them sat together after dinner, the boy climbed into Armin's lap and rested his head on his chest. "Papa," he said softly, "you don't leave anymore." Armin hugged him tightly, his voice breaking. "No, my son. I will never leave you again." In that simple sentence, years of regret melted into hope. The tycoon who once measured his life in profits and deals now measured it in smiles, hugs, and moments of togetherness. The story of Armin, Maria, and the boy did not end with wealth or luxury. It ended with something rich: real love, real family, and the realization that the greatest fortune a man can ever hold is not in his bank, but in the hearts of those who wait for him at home.